Hey, it's that time again. We have got the data pulled from Raider.io of actual WoW players doing real content. And this is one of the things I love putting together on the channel. The problem is, more often than not, we've analyzed the numbers and they've been rather depressing. Today, well, are we back? No, not exactly. Are we doomed? Absolutely not. Blizzard, in fact, may just be on the right track, as shown by actual player data that is downstream from their very own Armory API. I can tease you with one thing: we literally have not seen trends like this for years, and we're about to see today's sponsor. Displate. They are hands down the best way that you can customize your space. You can customize, collect, and rearrange your whole setup with ease because of their amazingly easy to use and renter-free mounting system. And the best news is they have got an awesome discount for you right now if you follow my link in the video description for Black Friday. 35% off 1 to 2 displates, 38% off 3 to 4, and 44% off 5 or more. So here's my latest stack. Of course, it's your boy Arthas, obviously. They do actually have the officially licensed Blizzard art, including new pieces by Bayard Wu, who, I mean, man, nails that key art. Beyond Arthas, you guys know I love science fiction, I love space, so I picked up these really fun cosmic horror posters that are like from a NASA collection. They're so cool. Now, the thing that's really killer is their magnet system. First, you've got the protective layer that goes on your wall to keep the wall surface safe. Then the magnets go on that, and then you just pop your displate on and it's done. And I love how magnets, are magnets, but also make it easy to position your art perfectly. You know, if you've ever, say, mounted something with screws into a wall and realized the angle is ever so slightly off. They ship worldwide in 4 to 5 days using excellent protective packaging. Each is QC'd and hand-signed by their master of production. They plant a tree for every displate they sell. And of course, since it's all magnets, swapping your collection around and getting new ones to spruce up your setup is dead handy. They're an awesome product, they're a fantastic way to support our channel, and you can check them out in the link down below. Let's get stuck in. Number one, if you want to know our methodology, it will be in the pinned comment where you can just click read more and you will see it. And with that said, here you have it, every WoW tier since Nighthold on normal mode. It's quite the downward line, isn't it? Especially in the days of the Shadowlands. Though one thing is for sure, that mixture of work from home and marketing that actually did seem to work really led to Shadowlands' massive day one sales and a hell of a first raid tier from a participation perspective, and when we flip it over to heroic difficulty, we see the same thing. From that high point of Nathria though, we see steep drops on both difficulties, especially from Nathria to Sanctum. Not only was Sanctum itself very weak, but my god, that was not a fun patch, and it was also super late. Of course, Sepulchre of the First Ones, while it was a better raid with a better patch, did see that bad trend continue. Now, in both normal and heroic mode, we see Vault of the Incarnates bringing WoW back to just above Sanctum numbers, an increase of 61.7% on normal and 73.07% on heroic, which looks pretty good. Now, Nathria saw a relative increase of 108.8% on normal and 73% on heroic over the participation of the previous raid, Ny'alotha. Yeah, it really did soar past all of the other raid tiers. Again, pandemic gameplay time, very powerful. And just for a sec, with player numbers like that for Castle Nathria, I really do have to wonder if that's why it actually took Blizzard longer to respond to player feedback and the likes of Covenants and Torghast. I mean, sure, there was logical sense to all of that feedback, but the thing is, Blizzard were seeing amazing numbers. It was their fastest selling expansion ever, and people turned up to and played the raid. Now, at this BlizzCon, they actually spoke of taking the feedback really to heart about halfway through Shadowlands. They also spoke about how a lot of things was just kind of taught to them as gospel. So if you think that they were rather rigid in their opinions, thought they knew best, and then saw all of this data that looked really good for the start of Shadowlands, they would have thought like, yeah, these are all valid concerns, but look at what players are actually doing. They're playing the game. We have the numbers. So yeah, it kind of makes sense that it's about halfway through the expansion that they took all that stuff to heart, because looking at these graphs, Yeah, it's pretty damn obvious about halfway through. So, Dragonflight's baseline was weak, but it had early signs of positivity. The clear rate on normal mode, that's the number of people who cleared boss 1 and then went on to finish the raid, it went back up to early Shadowlands rates, which in a way is good because basically in Sepulchre of the first ones, a lot of people didn't even stick around to see the end of the Jailer, which was not a good thing. It's still a bit behind Legion, but this is right around where expansions like BFA have been as well, so a fairly healthy thing. Heroic also fared well. It had a clear rate of 62%. That is higher than Nathria, it's higher than Sanctum and Sepulchre, but it is still a bit lower than Legion raids and later BFA raids. I mean, hell, the clear rates for the Legion raids are insane. Normal mode got about a 90% clear rate and Heroic was about a 70% clear rate. Of course, you would then think that during these periods of fairly high clear rates, you would probably see less player attrition. I think that broadly is holding from our dataset here. Numbers held strong from Legion. You can then see where they fell drastically after Uldir because early BFA was a mess, but then they do stabilize throughout BFA, right? And funny enough, you see those higher clear rates for Dazara Lore, Eternal Palace, and Nyalotha when you look into the dataset. That is, of course, where we actually started to see more healthy movements, where we stop losing players and we in fact almost even gain some in Nyalotha. Now, it's also true that Battle for Azeroth got far better with those patches, and that means that I can't draw a super firm causal link saying that, yes, obviously, as completion rate goes up, attrition goes down, but something along those lines seems like A, a good thing, and B, it passes the common sense test where you would imagine that, players who have actually logged in and eventually completed their goals will be more likely to have had a good experience and quit on their own terms and therefore will be willing to come back to the game. And that is something I bring up because it's where Aberrus starts to look good. From Vault to Aberrus, in first boss kills, we see a 27% drop and then a 19% drop for last boss kills. Yes, those are drops, but those pretty much always happen from patch to patch in an expansion, but the point is, these are small drops. This is the smallest tier-to-tier drop on normal mode that we've seen since the Eternal Palace, and that is in complete alignment with what Activision Blizzard said publicly about the expansion. Softer than initial sales, but with the best retention of a modern expansion. What about Heroic mode? Well, Heroic mode actually gets better. Of course, Heroic likely appeals to more dedicated players, and that kind of shows up in the numbers. Now sure, Sarkareth was easier than Razageth, so those last boss kills are partially explained by that. But first boss kills, that shows us guilds actually starting the raid, so it won't really reflect things like final boss difficulty, and on first boss kills, we see a 24% drop from Vault. That's a bit less than the drop in normal. It is the lowest drop in Heroic mode since Eternal Palace. The last boss kills? Only a 4.48% decrease. This is the smallest last boss kill drop that we've seen from one tier to another ever in World of Warcraft, and the Heroic clear rate is 78.25% on Heroic mode. And historically, this is the highest in our dataset, with Nyalotha, Nighthold, and Eternal Palace coming in just behind it. And by the way, the normal mode clear rate was 91.81%. That's super high. High enough to, in fact, be in line with Legion's numbers. And 9% more than Vault on normal and 15% more than Vault on Heroic. So yes, a higher percentage of people that actually went into Aberrus actually completed the raid and finished their goals than we saw with Vault. And that does seem to be a broadly healthy thing. And now, of course, this is also totally in line with my own experience and that of everybody I know. Aberrus is an easier raid than Vault, yes. Now still, Heroic was a fair jump in difficulty over normal. You know, the likes of Skarn and Sark could give you a little bit more trouble. And yeah, you got some head scratchers like Magmarax that just seem to be missing mechanics. Razageth was probably one of my favorite bosses ever. I think she's a way better boss than Sark. I did enjoy Sark though, but I can certainly say that, yeah, my team, we've been logging in, we've actually been progressing on our goals in a way that I feel has been reasonable, and we've all felt broadly a lot more motivated at this expansion than in BFA. And I certainly have to wonder if Blizzard have learned a lesson here, because I don't know if you've hopped into Mirdrasil yet, but Yggdrasil normal is super easy. I mean, Farak makes normal Sarkareth look like a cakewalk. We absolutely flattened him. You know, we got the whole thing, most of our players going in blind. We got it done in 2 3-hour nights, and I'm pretty sure we got Farak killed. It was either just before our midway break or just after. So yeah, point is, Yggdrasil is way easier. Yggdrasil Heroic, though, does seem to be a fairly significant step up over normal, so in a few weeks, we'll revisit this and we'll see just what sorts of lessons Blizzard have actually learned from Aberrus. Is easing things up a good thing or not? That certainly is a debate that we can have. At the very least, though, Mythic Mode does exist to provide the hardest difficulty, so let's see how that one has actually fared. And one thing stands out, last boss kills is a remarkable number. Number one, you can see how much that killed Jaden RNG, paired with the likes of Avatar being a total bastard, how those made Tomb of Sargeras a rock hard raid. But overall, if you draw the trend line, you absolutely see a first boss kills decrease that's fairly large. And when you focus in on Shadowlands and Dragonflight, I mean, it does look like a total collapse in participation. Therefore, it's good that Vault saw a 99.2% increase in first boss kills over Sepulchre, which is by far the largest increase in our dataset. But of course, like, not literal number of kills wise, because that only gets us to around just below Sanctum level of numbers. And that basically means that, while the numbers aren't great, retention is where Blizzard are going to be able to win here. And the clear rate is interesting, a 19% clear rate for Vault, which is higher than the clear rate of Nathria, but a bit lower than Sanctum and even the eventually very nerfed Sepulchre of the first ones. However, it's a clear rate that is above Nighthold, Tomb, Antorus, Uldir, Dazar'alor, and Eternal Palace. What about Aberrus then? Did players stick around for it? Well, first boss kills decreased by 31.9%, and that is the smallest drop that we've seen in quite a few tiers. In absolute terms, though, 5,778 kills is the second lowest number in our dataset. The only one smaller is Sepulchre of the first ones at 4,259. This does show that in absolute terms the numbers aren't looking great, but that the retention itself is looking good. And at the end of the day, if you haven't got retention sorted, there's no point in getting loads more players. They're just going to leave. You gotta fix retention first. However, clear rates are certainly something else. Take a look at last boss kills. Number one, Emerald Nightmare is humongous because it was the launch raid of Legion and it was shockingly easy. Everything else, though, I mean, somewhat flat. Like, between BFA and Dragonflight, it mostly is flat in terms of the number, in more raw terms, of guild kills. Now, Aberrus' 28.7% clear rate is actually the third highest in modern World of Warcraft history. It's beaten only by Emerald Nightmare, which I would contend basically doesn't count because it was so much of an outlier in its tuning, and Sepulchre of the first ones, where Zovaal, by the very end, was literally the most nerfed boss in history. This brings, then, the Dragonflight average mythic clear rate up to 23.7%. That is, in fact, the highest that has ever been, slightly topping Legion's 23.5%. So, of course, Legion's 23.5% was certainly skewed by Emerald Nightmare. This likely then is a healthy enough thing, even though the participation drop-off from Vault to Aberrus is higher than I would be comfortable with. And this basically leads me to a theory. I've got to wonder, like Mythic raiding, it's one of the most dedicated ways to play World of Warcraft. It's a humongous organizational challenge, and I have to wonder if its numbers would be both slower to fall and slower to rise because, Heroic and Normal are just way easier to get into. Anyway, what have we learned then? Well, this expansion's raw numbers are obviously not amazing compared to the past. Look at the graph, they're small. That reflects the softer launch and the lower appeal of the Dragonflight expansion. However, retention does appear to be way more healthy, and yes, you could say that this is an outlier because Sarkareth was just an easy boy to kill, but first boss kills, those are fairly relevant, and the drops from first boss from Vault to Aberrus, those were really small percentage-wise, and that is a very good indicator of raid participation from guilds, which, guilds doing raids kind of the beating heart of World of Warcraft. We've also learned that there may be quite the correlation between clear rate and retention as well. We do see Legion and BFA's high clear rates did seem to retain people well in the raiding community, while Shadowlands' didn't. Now, what do we do here? Do we blame the quality of the patches? Do we blame the quality of the raids? As an example, Warlords of Draenor, great raids, not that much content outside of it though, which obviously led to bad player retention. With Dragonflight, I would contend that we had really good raids and a way better expansion than before, and I think that overall has been a healthy thing. The big question then will be, what will Blizzard's takeaway from this be? Will they see, okay, Aberrus, good, we retained more people, and they also did craft a raid that had a higher clear rate? Do they think that was a good move? So far, if Emir Drasil normal mode is anything to go by, yeah, they probably do. Now, what's going to be key here for WoW's long-term health is their new strategy. We're currently targeting 18-month-long expansions, which is enough for 3 raid tiers, and they've said that's what they're going to be because these expansions will be the same size as Dragonflight. They will be full-sized expansions, and that's because the WoW team is significantly larger and is basically parallelized, where they essentially have a live team and then 2 expansion teams. Now, look at our graph and you'll see one thing. Participation rates obviously spike at expansion launches. No shit, that's where the marketing budget is, and it's the obvious time to start playing. Now, we don't have stats for the faded raids of Shadowlands. I imagine they help with retention a little bit, but not massively. My point here is that WoW, without much of any downtime and way more just, launch events going on, that is a recipe for growth, provided the content is good and that it does not get oversaturated. And on that, I am at least emboldened by the fact that Dragonflight seems to have shored up the game's fundamental systems with the talent revamp and all of that. And this seems to mean that War Within has been able to push other things forward, giving us our war bands. Now we've got these follower dungeons going on. We're going to have delves, which are literally seasonal content for people who don't do dungeons and raids. Or maybe if you're like me, a heroic mode ahead of the curve raider who likes to have a few alts and likes solo challenge content. So at the very least, Dragonflight, which has been a important but unexciting expansion, seems to have retained well. In that case, if they start building again, shipping truly new features that actually add to World of Warcraft in an evergreen fashion, could we even expect to see better retention? Because the gold standard would be some of what we saw in the Legion expansion where, come on man, just look at Antorus. Motherfuckers came back and they played World of Warcraft, which is just what we want. Okay, here's a quick little look at Mythic Plus. This is data from Best Keystone, and all I've got here is Dragonflight Season 1 and 2 data. There's been a few different M Plus data sources, and they've kind of went up and down over time. My hope here is that using what we have from Best Keystone at least means that even if the numbers aren't perfectly right, the methodology is the same, so if those numbers are indicative of trends, then they're a useful comparison. Basically, we see a strange Season 1 launch spike. That seems kind of cracked. I'm not really sure what's causing that, and some data is missing. But if you look at the numbers that are there, you can at least see that Season 2 appears to be holding stable with higher numbers than Season 1. But again, I'm a little suspicious of that data. Who knows? Maybe just the API calls just started returning errors and the numbers are smaller. I don't know. Anyway, look. While the high-end community no doubt have faced challenges, I think that in Season 2 the lower end will have benefited greatly from the approachability offered by the affix changes. Now, the God Comp no doubt impacted things, and while there's always been some sort of dominating meta for the highest cutting-edge Mythic Plus players, we've never seen something like this, because if you discount the week where Raider.io ran their Break the Meta competition, which very obviously decreased God Comp participation, what do we see? Just insane group comp emerge and stay very, very just dominating, Guardian, Holy Paladin, Ogvoker, Fire Mage, Shadow Priest, all basically accounting for 90% of all the keys done at the highest levels. Note, at the highest levels is what that data set is. Though obviously, and as you'll know if you try to do LFG for a lower key, maybe, a 15 or a 20 or something, then pretty much everybody was wanting the God Comp. And that was not a healthy thing. But it does look, at least, like Season 2 has got better retention than Season 1, if this data is to be trusted. Who knows? Ideally, I'd like to get the budget to hire a data scientist and then, pull the data from the various APIs, be it Raider.io or Blizzard Armory, ourselves and actually run that analysis. As for PvP, I want to bring it up, we don't have data, but I need to shout out Venruki. He's done an absolutely tremendous job of covering the honestly really goddamn deep problems PvP is facing right now. Participation appears to just have cratered. Solo shuffle queues are massive. Healers are non-existent, which of course makes those queues worse. There's very little or no rating inflation, which kind of means people can't climb the ladder to get rewards, which is a bit of a problem. There's barely any groups in LFG, and there is rampant just scripts, macro bots, and cheaters going on. It is a true omni-shambles, which is really bad, and they need to fix this up. At least in the next expansion, they are changing PvP gearing in a way that should be good, and if the solo queue rated battleground thing works in this patch, then we'll see solo queue RBGs, and as Venruki contends, and I think I think it is a reasonable take. It does seem that solo queue is the way forward. At the end of the day, it is how most of the very big games that pull in humongous numbers, it is actually how they run, and at the end of the day, you gotta change with the times. It's the way that it is. So I think there is some hope for PvP, but they number one need a developer that they can relate with now that Helinka's gone. They need somebody to be just the face of PvP. They need more content, they need more love, just, yeah, everything. Now, my TLDR. There are great signs in this data, but World of Warcraft has challenges to overcome. Obviously, to make a trend, you do kind of need more than 2 points. Right now, for this expansion, we've got Vault and Aberrus. I'm going to be breaking our normal format, and we will do, I'm commissioning, a first few week data comparison between these various different raids. It's a really mammoth effort for Dakar on our team to actually pull all of that data. Of course, our members over at bellular.ghost.io, you guys will be getting the raw research report for this video along with all of its numbers, and that video whenever he has completed the research. Anyway, that's it for me. Let's hope the good news continues. And of course, if you want to support the show, the best way to do that right now is to check out our sponsor by following the tracking link down below to let you know that I sent them. It, actually does quite literally help the channel. Anyhow, that's it. Thanks for watching. See you next time.